Morning.
Good morning and happy Friday.
Happy Friday. I think what we've decided is episodes should be posted on Fridays.
Have we decided that? I'm just
I
happy if they get posted. I'm not that picky any day of the week. I think it's like Russian roulette when you're going to hear from us.
but I don't
Um,
want it to be Russian roulette. So I think Fridays a lot. Mondays I'm going to be so for real with you guys. Weekends just become a really crunch, a really big crunch, and then if we know we have to post something by the Monday, it feels like a lot and our schedules are not aligning lately. But if we do it for Friday, that gives us the whole week
True.
to figure it out.
I
So,
buy Dr. Laura's logic and we'll do those things.
yeah. So, I think just from a consistency perspective, I think we can expect to be heard from on Fridays.
Love it.
So, I want to know, so we're talking on November 1st. This is the day after Halloween. And I'm curious, what kind of Halloween mom are you? And I mean this in a few ways. I mean this, number one, are you like the dress up, decorate, like send your kids to school with like this sandwich that looks like a pumpkin mom? And then number two, are you the mom that is ultimately like limiting candy intake, getting them to choose things, like throwing away their candy? Like, what does that look like for you?
This is such a detailed answer. So like I'm like the get through it mom, I feel
Mhm.
like. I'm also the co-parenting mom, so keep in mind I only have 50% of the decision making and I just have to effing rock and roll with whatever the other parent's doing, right? So
Right.
um I can tell you what I did do on Halloween. So I try to give my son choices. So I have my son split during the week, alternating weekdays. He's between my house and his dad's house. So basically the morning he was getting dropped off for, Halloween festivities, he was at my house. I said, okay, Bennett, do you want your costume or do you want to make an orange shirt? So I don't know where all the listeners are. We are in Ontario and this particular school is kind of more encouraging like orange and black day because there's so many different costumes you can't wear for a variety of reasons in which I will not get into. But so I asked my son, like, do you want to do a craft t-shirt or do you want to wear your Halloween costume that I knew was at his dad's house? I want to make a shirt with you, mommy. Okay, great. So this is where I'm the type of mom. Okay, I go to Michael's. I buy one of those orange gilded t-shirts. I go and get some felt. Also, for those that don't know me, I hate any textured anything, like touching sensory wise. So this
I didn't
tested
know that.
yeah, can't touch cotton balls. Or if I do,
Oh,
it's like I have to like prep myself for it. So the idea that I was touching felt,
so
I
wait,
actually I wore
you're doing
gloves.
you're doing acupuncture for a patient and you go to swab. Are you using alcohol wipes or are you like almost
No, no, our
wiping?
college, no, first of all, our college, actually advises against that, number
Okay.
one.
Okay.
Number two, what I can do, great question, Dr. Laura, is I can use a Q-tip. So when it comes out, I can touch the plasticky or where Q-tip's made out of in the middle, but I touch
No
that and then
idea.
just dab or dab, and then
Oh
we
my gosh.
dispose appropriately. So,
Well, that's a
anyways,
fun fact.
yeah, that is a fun fact. So I have texture issues. So we cut out, I made like an angry pumpkin t-shirt to which, if anybody's, excited to know how this ends, my son woke up the next morning and then demanded his Halloween costume instead that I did not have.
Yeah.
Um, he was sent to school with a completely normal lunch. I do limit candy intake, because I am who I am as a person. And then I went trick-or-treating with my ex-husband and his girlfriend. We just like awkwardly all
Stop, did
shuffled
you?
around.
I
Yep,
didn't know that.
I invite myself places.
I love that for you.
Halloween has fallen on his day the last couple of years, so I just invite myself out and I make it really awkward for anybody to say no.
Oh my.
Um, So I just went trick or treating with them, one big family, and it was as
Okay.
awkward as you can imagine.
Can I just say that if I had known that was going down, I would have opted for your Halloween and not my own.
Well, now we gotta know what kind of Halloween mom you are.
Um, well, you know what? I feel like I was one way when I first started having kids, and I've slowly become a little bit of a different way with Leo when he was young. And I feel like it's truly reflected. Well, I don't know. I was going to say, I feel like it's truly reflected in him as a person because he doesn't eat chocolate. He doesn't like chocolate. He thinks it's gross. He won't like eat a chocolate chip cookie. Like he just doesn't do that stuff. And I think it might be just be a personality trait. But I was very when he was younger, I was very strict with like he doesn't need any candy at all, zero before the age of 2. Like I was like, there's no reason. There's literally no reason. He doesn't
No,
care.
actually, I'm right. I'm right with you.
He doesn't know about it. He doesn't like
They
two
don't
like
crave it. They don't crave it if they've never had
right.
it.
And then Lorenzo came along. And when Leo was 2 and like going on to 3, Lorenzo was born when Leo was 2. So then by the time Lorenzo was 1.5, like then when he could like actually like, you know, start to see things and want things and whatever, Leo was already allowed to do those things. Now, did I give Lorenzo candy? No, I didn't. But when he started daycare and he was, you know, he was 2 and he was like doing all the stuff, I kind of had to I had to let go of all control. Like with Leo, we were in the pandemic. I made all his food. I would puree it. I would do.
You had that control and all
Yeah.
times, really.
And then Lorenzo, I had to send him off to a daycare at 5 months old, mind you, because I don't get paid if I don't work. And so I sent him to a daycare at 5 months old, full time, infant daycare, and they didn't let me send anything. All I could send was his bottle because he was still drinking formula. But in the way of solids, I couldn't send anything. The rule was I could only send it if it was packaged. And I was like, well, if it's already packaged, like you can just feed him whatever you have. Like that doesn't make any sense. So that was a little bit of like a thing I had to let go of. Mm-hmm. And then since he's gone to other daycares where again, they provide the food, you don't provide the food. And so you try to choose the best thing you can, but it kind of is what it is at that point. And then with Halloween, I try to allow, so with my kids last night, what I did is I said, you guys can choose 5 things from your Halloween bucket. We can put them aside. The rest you can put in a bucket, give to me, and I will buy you a toy. And so they kind of trade that out as like almost like a monetary thing.
Right.
So that I can get them something. So they were able to eat. I let them eat 3 things last night, which I at first was like, I'll just let them eat 1. I let them eat 3 things last night, which like to me, that was like kind of a switch from what I had done in the past. And then after the 3 things, they didn't ask for anything more. And
Can I tell you a secret of what I did last night?
What?
So I went home after my super co-parenting night and I was like, I want chocolate. So did my ass not drive to Zayre's and buy, first of all, I was out of espresso. So I bought espresso and Reese's peanut butter cups. So like I got my candy.
Yeah.
On the way
I
home.
ate candy. I ate candy.
Yeah. You know what's weird though? Bennett does it. So like for the first like 2 days, he's like, there's Halloween candy in there. Yeah. And I'm like, yep, you get like 1. Yeah. But then he forgets about it. My boyfriend bought him like a giant Kinder Egg. It like sat there forever because he also doesn't really care. He wants the toy inside. Yeah. But the chocolate, he's like, if it's there, I'll eat it, I guess. But like I end up throwing it all out, really.
Yeah. Well, normally what I would do is I would get them to choose those 5 things, and then I would take the monetary candy that they've given me in exchange for the toy that I've told them I'm getting. And I would just dump the extra candy back into the bowl and I would just give it out to kids because we get so many, like the amount of candy and chips I had, we just get so many kids in our neighborhood. And so normally like we have kids coming till almost 9. So I'm like, well, you guys can have this candy that like we just trick or treated for. Like I'm out. And then we end up getting rid of it all. But last night, because it was such bad weather, our last kid was like $7.50. And so we ended up having extra. So what I did is I just went through the candy and I divided it. Now they each have a Ziploc bag. I let Leo choose 1 thing to bring to school today. And because I don't want him to feel deprived. I don't want him to be one of those kids that like binges when he's older.
You know, I'm listening to us and I have a funny feeling we're like a fringe minority here. I'm pretty sure people are going to listen to us and be like, these guys are actually nuts.
Oh.
I can't wait to hear from them. I want you guys to message us about this. Like, where do they stand on the candy?
Okay, I just want to tell you, I was the kid that, and you know what? I look back at my childhood, I'm like, wow, we ate unhealthy. Now, my mom was very like, when she cooked, we had chicken, rice, veggies. Like, it was very basic, all the things. It wasn't unhealthy. But the problem was my mom, RN, shift work, worked every other weekend. Like,
Take
we
some
were,
time for this shit.
yeah, and a lot of times we were like at a babysitter or with our dad who didn't cook. And like so there was a lot of moving pieces, but we were also the kids that had every single cereal in the house. I had Joe Louis in my lunch. I had Dunkaroos in my
Joe
lunch.
Louise.
I'm not even joking. Like I had you name the processed packaged food and it was in my personal lunch. Now,
Right.
people would argue and say, "Well, that happened to me and I'm fine." But then I look at like am I though?
Is she fine?
Am I though? I look at some of the struggles I've had with my health and although they haven't been, severe, but I've
Right.
had, constipation issues growing up. I've had hormonal imbalances. I've had fibroids. I have acne. And it's interesting. I wonder, and I've done a lot of work since I've been a naturopathic doctor for 7 years. So like I've done my own work. But I just wonder if things wouldn't have been like that or maybe
Right.
I wouldn't have such trouble losing weight in my 30s if I had a better, foundation. I don't know the answer. But
No, of
yet
course.
again, it's these conversations of like, I'm fine. It's like, but are we? Right?
Right.
I said to my mom, I'm like, how did I not get diabetes for real?
Right.
So, anyways, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. Speaking of this kind of ties in nicely. We've been talking about a particular health metric this week in mostly our personal life.
Well, and
Uh,
last week we spoke about burnout, and I think
right.
this is like a good
Yeah,
topic to
actually, this is a really good sort of transition and maybe a way that people can tangibly track some aspects of their health.
Yeah, and I want to say, so what we're talking about today is HRV, also known as heart rate variability. And I want to point out the fact that I had candy last night and my HRV went down.
Did it really?
Yeah. I also had a glass of wine.
Right. Well, I mean, the two of them together. Mine
Not
did
great.
not, surprisingly, after my Reese cup, but
Oh, okay.
I'll take it.
Yep. So let's just talk about what HRV is. So
Yeah.
HRV is heart rate variability. And so I'm just reading an article here just so you can get a good idea of what it is and what we're kind of talking about, because this is something that if most of you have a smartwatch of some sort, you can track this metric. And I think when we talk about stress, when we talk about, how to manage stress, we're like cortisol, 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 but there's no objective measures if you don't like nervous system trumps cortisol. And so we need to have a regulated nervous system for our hormones, for our gut, for weight loss, for all the things. And
Yeah.
this is actually an objective measure because, I joked about it with Dr. Ashley and, she's telling me her HRV because I said my
Right.
HRV goal, I want to be around 80. She was like, well, I'm not. And like hundreds of people I work with,
Well, yes. Like,
I
I was
said,
just reflecting and
right,
saying,
right.
that's interesting because I don't know a single person that has that particular HRV. And then I thought about it and I was like, I'm going to do some research. I'm going to ask people.
So I came back to Dr. Ashley and I said, would you objectively say that your nervous system is well regulated?
Right.
Right? Mine's not. I can tell
Yeah.
you that for free.
And I said reasonably well. In case anybody's wondering, I gave myself a B plus. Not in the A's. We all strive to be straight A students.
I think we should aim for A's. But
Yes.
we're going to talk about the top 4 points about HRV, just so you get an overview. Number 1, HRV is a holistic health indicator. It's a key indicator of autonomic nervous system balance, reflecting not only heart health, but also how effectively the body manages stress and recovers. Monitoring HRV can offer essential insights for tailoring personal health and wellness strategies. And so they're talking about what specifically is it. So it refers to the variation in time intervals between consecutive heartbeats. Unlike heart rate, which measures the average number of beats per minute, HRV focuses on the slight variations in time between these beats. So HRV looks at those time intervals, which can vary from beat to beat. The variability is a more complex and nuanced measure, reflecting the heart responsiveness and the balance of the autonomic nervous system. And so essentially, the ANS, the autonomic nervous system, adjusts the interval between each heartbeat in response to internal and external factors such as physical exertion, stress, or relaxation. Various factors can influence HRV, including breathing patterns, hormonal fluctuations, metabolic processes, and even psychological states like stress or happiness. And so the autonomic nervous system controls involuntary body functions, and we have two main parts. We have the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic. So sympathetic is fight or flight, parasympathetic, rest and digest. And so this balance is crucial for your HRV. And so interestingly enough, when we look at gender differences, because obviously they're going to differ between men and women. Women generally have a faster heart rate and less variation in the time between heart rates. Their heart rate variability shows more influence from the part of the nervous system associated with rest and digestion. There is less influence from the part of the nervous system associated with the fight or flight.
Right.
Implied by comparison, men have more variability in the time between heartbeats and a different balance in the nervous system's control over the heart, with relatively more influence from the fight or flight system. And so if you can look at HRV in the menstrual cycle, contraception, in pregnancy, and in menopause. And so I just want to give an overview because I said there's changes with hormones.
Yeah.
So sex hormones, particularly estrogen and progesterone, play a significant role in modulating HRV. Estrogen tends to enhance vagal tone associated with body's rest and digest. And progesterone calms the brain but can decrease vagal tone and can affect HRV. So in the follicular phase, again, first half of your cycle, follicular phase, when hormone levels are lower, HRV is at its peak. In the luteal phase, and this actually makes sense, like a lot of people talk about not feeling good in the second half of their cycle. And in the luteal phase, as progesterone rises, there is a stimulation of the sympathetic nervous system that results in a lower HRV, indicating reduced stress resilience.
Well, actually, I've never thought to look at it with respect to my cycle because I, as a human, have overall been looking at like long-term climbs is what I would like to see. But that's really neat.
And interestingly enough, the use of hormonal contraception affects HRV distinctly different from the natural menstrual cycle. HRV tends to increase at the beginning of the pill, but decreases over the course of taking the active pill. It actually reaches its lowest point during the first few days of the placebo. So conversely,
when you take the hormones away, then it would.
So again, in the follicular phase, which just to map it out, when you take the pill, you're taking it and then you stop taking it. And when you stop taking it, that's your quote unquote period, right? And so that would be the alleged follicular phase, right? It's the period. Right. So we know that HRV during the follicular phase is actually going to be at its peak. But if you're in birth control, it's actually saying that during that placebo pill, so the bleed, it's actually going to be at its lowest. So that's interesting because potentially your resilience and recovery is, excuse me, lower during your bleed if you're on birth control. In pregnancy, we see that HRV may decrease due to the increased heart rate and cardiac output.
Yeah.
This is a normal response. But again, we know that in pregnancy, we have less resilience to stress, less resilience to illness. So that makes sense.
I was going to say, I would have guessed that.
Yeah. And then in menopause, what do you think happens in menopause?
I'm going to assume it decreases.
Yeah. So the decline in estrogen levels in menopause can lead to a reduction in HRV, reflecting changes in the autonomic nervous system's function. This hormonal shift leads to a decrease in HRV, indicating an increase in fight or flight activity and a decrease in rest and digest activity. We see this in menopause and perimenopause. We see changes in the digestive system. We see less ability to regulate. We see impacts in sleep, and it's hormonal, but it's also the nervous system. And it says this change in HRV baseline during and after menopause is not typically captured by wearable technology. That's interesting. That's a random note that I just. But again, the decrease in HRV is also associated with an increased risk of cardiovascular disease.
This is interesting.
That's pretty crazy. The biggest question that Dr. Ashley and I have been talking about over the last few days is actually what's a good score? Like what should we?
Yes, yes. And you know what, to be fair, this is also like relatively new.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that's still to be determined. And the other thing I was thinking of as you were chatting is, all of this being said, is there a different, is it like growth charts? Like, is there a different chart for men and women at this point? I actually don't know the answer to that.
Well, I would assume so, but
I would assume so too.
the article I'm looking at is just women. So,
Okay.
it says, what is a good HRV score for women? And it's saying, so there's ranges, but I would imagine being at the higher end of the range would be
It's
more
always is
optimal.
generally going to be better. Yes.
Yeah. So there are benchmarks. So for a 20-year-old woman, there is a more resilient and responsive autonomic nervous system. A typical HRV could be anywhere. See, this is a big range from 55 to 105.
You know what's funny? I feel dumb right now. I didn't know we were going beyond 100. Like, I thought 100 was the cap. Okay, so I'm not dumb.
I don't know what it goes up to.
No, I was just thinking, I was like, shoot, where's the other?
I'm thinking like it's a percentage system.
No, me too. I thought, yeah, I was like 100 is the max. No? Okay, we'll have to.
Interesting.
We'll have to dive into this a bit more.
Yeah, and it says a 30-year-old woman could be from 45 to 95. A 40-year-old woman could be from 40 to 85. And a 50-year-old woman, 35 to 75. 70-year-old woman, I guess it just skips to 70, 25 to 65. So I think, based on our previous conversations, 80 is a good target for us.
Right.
Because the range in your 30s is 45 to 95. So I think 75 to 80 would be a good target.
Right.
So what are your thoughts?
That seems reasonable to me when I look at where I hover around, and when I look at what I scored myself. I think like that's about right. Like, I usually hover between like 65 and 70. And like I said, do I think I could do better? Yeah, I do. Yeah. So, having 80 and above being like, your A, that checks with what I kind of would have assumed without having those metrics. And I think it's always good to have goals. And I think what's tricky, and what the article does a really good job talking about, is that it is a conglomeration of different factors. I mean, it doesn't dive into necessarily all of the different influences of the nervous system, but
oh, I thought you were going to say of like the interventions of things that impact it, but you're right. It doesn't go into all
I mean, that part and parcel, that would be the same thing, right? So giving people, because some people might be watching this on their smartwatches and be like, oh my God, I'm not in those ranges, and maybe panicking. That's probably not going to help. But what might help is focusing on some of those, interventions. And like we talk about all the time, you can't, you can't control all of the things in your life. Like, sometimes it's really hard to control the life stressors that are stressing out your nervous system. But what you might have more control over, let's say, are your sleep, eating habits, and alcohol habits. And knowing that those points of intervention are very likely to help this overall metric can give you something to work on, because there's nothing worse than feeling like kind of helpless, right? And
what did you say your HRV sits at?
Usually between 65 and like low 70s.
And I think for being like, for having gone through what you've been through in the past few months, that's pretty good.
Right. Not deaths when I said B+. I gave myself a B+. Like, I don't think I'm doing poorly. And for context, people are listening, I'm actively going through a divorce, opened up a business, have,
fake. Nope.
tumultuous stuff with past people.
We're just going to leave that there.
We're going to leave that one there. But, there's stuff. Yeah. I'm a single mom. When things come up, I have to deal with them. Like I said, I hung out with my ex-husband on Halloween. Wasn't my first choice. But,
you should have. Okay. Just like sliding back to there for 1.5 seconds. You should have invited my husband.
Oh my God. You know what? Luch would have been great. Luch would have been great. We would have done
You would have
well.
been chatting it up with them
Yeah,
and
totally.
they
Totally.
wouldn't even know. They'd be like,
It
whoa,
was great. To
whoa.
be fair, so would my boyfriend.
Yeah, you should have been.
He's
That
somebody,
would have been a
Dr.
better
Laura and I were
scenario.
chatting. Dr. Laura and I were chatting, like, who do we think is a good HRV in our life? And there was a couple people that came to mind, and one of which was my boyfriend, because he's the least stressed out person I've ever met in my life. Like,
Yeah.
I love his life and just how chill he is.
You have to talk about the profession of the person who does have a good HRV.
Oh, this individual?
No, the one that you told me about.
Oh, yes. And then a family member of mine that I was chatting to last night, I was like, I bet you this sucker has a good HRV. And he does, and it hovers between like 85 and low 90s. What I think is cool about this.
Wait, just to confirm, that wasn't his resting heart rate, right?
No, was not his resting heart rate. He actually has one of those super fancy Garmins that tracks a lot of different metrics.
Okay.
So here's what I think is interesting and something that people can take away, because this goes under the like uncontrollables, right? Some people are like, well, I have kids, like no hope for me. Nope, this gentleman has 2 young children, under 4 and under 2. Okay. He is also responsible for 50% of the childcare. So he's a police officer. He works shift work. Right now he's working doubles. When he's not working, his wife's working. So they actually don't have a lot of childcare. So they like swap off. So he is dad and he is responsible for those kids.
Yeah.
So, very, very involved dad. Very little sleep. This man has very, very little sleep. But he's very active. He manages his stress quite well.
Well, and
I think that's cool.
Let's talk about the things that we can actually do, because this article goes into detail. So, diet, number 1. So we know that a balance of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, lean proteins can actually positively influence HRV. We know avoiding highly processed foods and foods high in sugar. So again, like I said, I had Halloween candy and I had a glass of wine.
And it affected it.
And it affected it. Hydration. I think, and I'm going to go out on a limb, I think people underestimate hydration. People don't think about drinking water. I was actually talking to my mom yesterday. She was like, oh, I have, like, my back is, hurting me lately. And I'm like, how much water have you been drinking? She's like, not a lot. Okay, so you know what? When you've consistently had enough protein and drank enough water for the day for 2 weeks straight, I need you to report back. And if you're still in pain, we will reassess.
I like that.
So, caffeine and alcohol, right?
See, I sneakily wonder if I cut my caffeine intake, what that would look like.
No.
Unsure if I'm ready for it. I'm going to be so honest.
No.
Yeah.
Excessive consumption of caffeine or alcohol.
Right.
Exercise, interestingly enough, activities like, so if we look at cardio, activities like walking, running, and cycling can enhance HRV by strengthening the heart and improve cardiovascular efficiency. Moderate strength training can also have a positive effect, though excessive high-intensity workouts without adequate recovery can lower HRV temporarily.
Right.
We know that rest and recovery is important. Adequate recovery between intense workouts is actually crucial for HRV. So all our, F45ers or Orange Theory peeps, this is where it's really important to take that rest, right?
Like, particularly when we couple it with other vulnerable times like menopause, let's say, right?
Yes. And a lot of people trying to lose weight are like, let's just work harder, more often. And we have to. This is actually particularly why I enjoy when we do push connect programs. I know that I'm strength training twice a week. And I know that that's when I'm going to be putting in my max effort lifting weights. And I want to tell you, I put my tires in my car by myself yesterday.
And
Luch was like, do you want me to do it? I'm like, no, because this is why I lift.
It's ready for this.
I am ready for this. No, and I did.
She's made me do pull-ups.
And I lifted them up. What's it called? Ergonomically? I don't know. Is that the word? Yeah. I lifted them up so I didn't pull anything. And those suckers were friggin' heavy.
Yeah,
and I was like, this is why we're exercising, right? Like, this is why we're exercising, so that we can lift tires into our vehicle by ourselves. So we don't have to be, this is a blue job. Right. I can actually take it as a pink job, right?
I like it.
Sleep. So quality over quantity. It's not just about how long you sleep. It's about the quality. So deep interrupted, and moms here are like, deep interrupted. When is that a thing? And
Right.
that's okay. But it's like looking at the moving parts. It's like if you can't have deep if you can't have deep uninterrupted sleep, then you have to, something else has got to give, right?
Right.
It's like we have to be, and this is what I talk about with patients, for example, who are like, Laura, I just want to do diet and lifestyle. I don't want to take any supplements. I'm like, wow, your diet and lifestyle's got to be tight, right?
Right. It's yeah, we have to like perfect the thing.
Right. And so if your sleep, and I don't get every single night deep uninterrupted sleep. Last night I did, but like the 3 weeks before, I don't think I had slept one night fully without
Right.
Lorenzo.
Look at my shift worker family member.
Yep.
That's not the whole story.
Yep. Right. Now shift working's tough, but a
So
consistent
tough.
sleep schedule is really important if you can manage that. Again, you're like, Dr. Laura, Dr. Ashley, I work shift work. Great, no problem. So you're going to have to cut alcohol, and you're going to have to make sure you're exercising and resting and recovering. And you're going to
Right.
have to make sure you're having enough protein and hydration, right? All the other pieces have to be a little bit more on point. And maybe you talk to your doctor, your naturopathic doctor, about taking melatonin, if that makes sense, right? To help that circadian rhythm. Avoiding stimulants before bed. I always say like no caffeine past noon. So that's my
I agree
rule.
with that 100%. That's how I have to live my life too.
And also nicotine. I feel like people who use nicotine, whether it's smoking or those powders or whatever, I feel like they don't really realize that can impact your HRV. So that's that. That's all we got for you.
I hope it's helpful.
Yeah. So if you guys didn't know about HRV, here it is.
Here it is. Look it up, chat about it, track
Yeah,
it.
it's an easy metric found on your watch, on your ring, on whatever device you use. And it's a really cool way to objectively look at your progress versus other sort of metrics that we don't get to see at home. Like sleep score is one thing, but your HRV takes into account everything.
Yeah.
So, all right. So if you guys have questions, let us know. But we'd love to hear from you about the Halloween, about your HRV. Did you learn something new? Do you have questions? Do you have things you want us to talk about? Love it.
Tell us.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.